Yeah, I'm really happy to be here to moderate the session about IoT Revolution. And actually, maybe just as a short introduction, talking about IoT Revolution is something which is also something which is subject to discussion, because maybe it's not a revolution, but it's an evolution after all. The topic has been all over the place for a few years now, and so I'm really happy to have maybe a bit provocative discussion about what IoT actually is and what are we talking about, because it's not that clear. And so I'm happy to invite three persons which will bring different approaches to the discussion what IoT is and where we're heading towards. First, I'd like to invite Haertel. Let me briefly introduce Carlos for a second. He's CTO and Chief Innovation Officer of GE Europe with very broad responsibilities. He's in charge of driving technologies within GE, new technologies, product developments, innovations in general. And on the other side, he's partnering with GE Digital, something which is quite special and I find very interesting, due to the fact that GE is concentrating all the development activities in a separate unit, and the question might be how cooperation might work there. Apart from that, he oversees the cooperation with customers and R&D partners, and is director of GE European Technology Center in Garing. Welcome. Yeah, as second, I'd like to welcome Steffen Fidelius. See, we're in Austria, so it's very much about being polite and, yeah. Yeah, Steffen is from Vodafone. He's senior manager from Vodafone Germany. He's bringing a different approach, and which is very interesting, a less technology-oriented approach and more a product-oriented approach. He's product development, in charge of product development for consumer markets, so the B2C approach might become here very interesting, which is a relevant part of IoT itself. And he's focusing on business transformation programs and innovation, especially in the network domain, which is, like for connectivity, one of the crucial aspects. Maybe one number which might be interesting about Vodafone. Right now, if I'm not wrong, about 60 million devices are connected over your IoT platform, which is quite an interesting number. But on the same time, if we think about how many devices will connect it in a few years from now, 60 million might be nothing. And this exponential question might be something interesting to talk about later.
Sorry to correct you, Daniel. It's exactly 68 million.
Sorry. Yeah, but you see, 8 million might be something in a few years, which we gain in a day. So let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and last not least, before to go into the discussion, I'm more than happy to invite Melih, Werner. Okay. Melih is the CTO from DXC Technologies, which is one of the largest IT consulting companies. So again, bring a different approach to it. Now I allow myself to sit down, maybe. And basically, DXC is driving digital transformation. So covering a quite diverse field of product development areas, where IoT is one crucial one of them. He's responsible for Central Europe and Nordics, focusing on aspects like manufacturing, analytics, IoT, but also self-driving cars. And that brings us instantly to the first interesting question. Now, if you've been part on the panels, on the other discussions, you've seen talks about robotics, about autonomous driving, about AI, about web engineering, developing single-page applications. And when I've been sitting there, I had the impression all of them are connected to IoT. So the question, what actually is IoT? It's a buzzword. 10 years ago, IoT was machine-to-machine communication. Nowadays, people talking about Industry 4.0. Everybody's talking about smart homes. A lot of people are saying Alexa is a smart home. So a big question, actually, what is IoT, how it can be defined? And I would start with the first round, trying to define what actually IoT for the participant is and what IoT for all of us could be. Because one might say IoT is 95% web engineering and the rest is a bit sensors and actors. So I would ask you, when you say, how would you define IoT for yourself or for your company, for Vodafone, and what's your approach towards the industry?
Okay, so as you said, we could have sat here 10 years ago and would probably discuss about M2M. So the main difference for me regarding IoT is that IoT brings the device connectivity into the consumer, into the mass market. And this is something exciting. We are doing right now, also as a Vodafone, because we are very focused also on the consumer market. And let me say IoT for myself is just a container around of very interesting and challenging technologies and topics. For example, we speak about, obviously, the devices. You know, we have the big ones, like a car or an industrial machine with very complex data models behind the scene. By the way, Vodafone today connects around 14 million cars to the network, so connected cars. On the other side, we have the small things that are very often limited in power, in memory, in processing power, and so on. So this is something we have to take into account when we engineer products for the end customers during our product development process. And then we have layers on top, like connectivity. Well, this is the DNA of Vodafone. It's all about bandwidth, throughput, quality of service. And if you connect something to the internet, you can immediately talk about security. And what I see is that, from my perspective, traditional security controls fall short in the IoT domain because they simply don't scale and they are too expensive. So we need to think about new approaches that protect our beloved IoT devices out there because they are not sitting in well-guarded data center. They are somewhere in your backyard, in your home, or in the field somewhere. And on top of security, and I'm speaking right now, Daniel, don't hesitate to interrupt. But on top of this, then we have to think about data analytics because our IoT devices are going to produce very big lakes of data, and those data are of no use for our end users, for our customers, unless we turn them into reasonable results, into insight that they can base their decisions, their strategy on the output. So data analytics, like big data, is a very important topic. And last but not least, on top, we have to set, and this is probably your playground as developers, on top we have to set very smart applications that make it very playful for our users to use their zoo of devices and keep them under control. So it's a bunch of topics, and this is probably also the key message towards you as a developer community. Please do not just focus on fancy interfaces and application. You have to consider the entire stacks, especially the, let's say, specifics that IoT devices come with, okay?
This completeness and the vertical hierarchy of different stacks which has to be integrated is quite interesting. Where the strategy from Vodafone is pretty clear. You come from connectivity side and build different layers on top, and the last layer is the one you try to open up and say, guys, build applications on top of the stack we provide. Now, how's the strategy from General Electric? What's your angle towards? As your market is quite different.
Right. So, I mean, as an industrial company, we are, in a sense, more on the demand side of the IoT than on the supply side. Although we do develop quite a bit of stuff around sensors and edge devices and connectivity as well. But fundamentally, we look at it in terms of what can that added connectivity, what can the added availability of information that is easy to transfer, easy to gather, easy to transfer, and cheap to transfer, easy to store, and increasingly easy to analyze, at least cheaper to analyze, what can they do in terms of machine performance or operational optimization for the customers. So we look at it from that angle, and then the technology piece of it, if you will, is kind of like hopefully there at the right moment in time. IoT is a reality, if you will, when every machine that is out there in the field, and not only the complete system, say a wind turbine, but also its components, is connected to the internet, has an IP address, if you will. Right? So think of a wind turbine. You have the wind turbine as a whole aggregate. Then you have a nacelle on top where the turbine is sitting and the shaft is sitting. And then that shaft may have a gearbox connected to it, and the gearbox may have a number of bearings. The gearbox and the bearings, there may be some sensors on it that measure some behavioral quantities, but that is nothing that's available easily to a broad set of users. That's limited in use, often limited even to use on site, and if just there's an emergency signal, maybe a phone call, if you will, goes out to a service team and says, like, something's wrong here. But imagine in the future that all those subsystems, components, they're all visible and transparent in what they do, how they behave, how they do feel, because they stream their life, their health state in real time into the net. What do you do with that information? How do you turn that into value for the user, into value for us as an OEM, in operational improvements, in a way that is agreed among the various participants along the value chain? And that's a question of who owns the data and who owns the benefit and the monetary value that comes out of it at the end of the day. That isn't clear at all. The first step is to get it all connected and to make sure you can do this in a robust fashion and in a cost-effective fashion.
I think also that's an interesting point we are just now at. The last 10 years, like, the feasibility was still the issue. Now it's feasible. Now the question is, what the heck are we going to do with it, and how are we going to earn money? And that's a question I would ask you as service provider building applications. On your customers, how do you see what the angle is? Where's the way to earn money, or where's the need? Let's forget money for a second. Where's the need?
I mean, what I see is basically there are, let's say, two dimensions to look at it, and we're looking, let's say, more from a business and also from a, let's say, implementation and project perspective. And there are definitely stuff, what I would say is, which is really touching business models. You know, so one example would be a project we've done around precision farming, for instance. So there's really this chemicals companies sold chemicals to the farmers to protect crop. So, but now they go more into really precisely only spraying certain areas. So, and they basically sell a subscription, an app, and basically really the service to increase yield for the farmer instead of just selling them chemicals, because they wanted to distinguish from their competition. So they go into a subscription model, into a service model, which is really completely changing the whole business of the customer, of our customer. So this is really disrupting basically their business models and using analytics, image recognition, IoTs to really steer the farming machines. So this is really on the business model side. And then there's a whole, and the most of the use cases we see is more what I say is more around operational efficiency. So stuff around supply chain management optimization, stuff around basically getting to a connected factory to get to more flexible production, getting to really things which are helping you with your using IoT solutions to get more effective in your business, but actually not really changing in terms of what you're selling or how you sell. So, and the way I look at it is basically, so we try to really start in the beginning and really figuring out what we want to achieve. And in most of the cases, I don't see, let's say, like pure IoT cases. Yeah. So it's, you can call them digital solutions or whatever, but it's usually using a mobile app, it is using image recognition like analytics, it might be using virtual device management to manage the devices, it uses connectivity as a big issue, especially in the shop floor. So I would say it's really multifaceted, and you will, I mean, therefore when you say what is IoT, it's really difficult to say it's really the pinpoint device thing people are talking about.
Yeah, but I think we found now, for at least in an industry context, a pretty nice definition where central use cases are around optimizing efficiency or even developing new ways how to earn money or how to get resources. Now, maybe to get the switch from the industry context to the B2C context, where would you say is for consumers the need? Where's the big angle why IoT becomes relevant?
I guess, first of all, it has to be easy. And as I said, the consumer doesn't enter your shop or your retail shop or your online store and says, I want to buy IoT. I'm willing to pay for it. Because they go for a solution end-to-end. And they want to fix a problem or want to turn an idea into some interesting model. So what we really have to look at is the entire chain, and we have to make it very easy for them, again, to manage, to control their slew of applications around their houses, around in the field, or wherever necessary, okay? So an end-to-end solution, putting the customer in the center and start to develop applications considering the specifics we see in IoT regarding connectivity, regarding security, regarding making something meaningful out of these huge data lakes we are going to end up in a few years, because the number of IoT devices is dramatically increasing also in the mass market. We need to store we need to store them somewhere, and again, a customer buys a solution, a capability, and not the technology. And this is the view we have to take, okay?
I think on the other side, it sounds like heaven for a full-stack developer, because what you need is like the whole chain, but that's a question I'm going to post afterwards, what people are required in order to develop IoT applications. But before to go into that, I would like to address a question coming from the audience, which is quite interesting, concerning blockchain. So since IoT is distributed and blockchain is distributed, isn't that a perfect match? And if yes.
I think it's a perfect marriage. And one thing I'm super excited about is a technology called IOTA. So it's actually about tangible. So that's something, I and my team are basically investing, and actually we're already implementing first use case, and it's also very accessible. So if you are a developer, you can go to iota.org and basically really play around with the API. So what it essentially allows you to do is, on a very cheap price point, transactions between machines. Just imagine you have a car, and we heard so much about self-driving cars in the past hours. So imagine you have a self-driving car, and you want to charge that car, so that car needs to be paid. And actually, the payment is not bound to the driver, it's actually bound to the car. So the car needs to be able to do a blockchain or a transaction. So this is, I think it's a perfect marriage. And yeah, so I think we're just in the start, and I'm thinking about the right use cases.
Yeah, so I would echo that. I think there is a big expectations around new safe ways of transferring data and ensuring that the data quality is appropriate. Let me give you another case here with 3D printing. When you think of distributed manufacturing environments, and you send your drawing that you have for a safety critical part to a small factory nearby, and how can you ensure that the file that arrives is the original file that you have sent? Well, there may be someone willing to corrupt the file in order to make that critical part break in the application, right? Could be would say, well, for whatever reason people might want to do that. There's an enormous need to ensure that things are exactly the way you hope them to be. And blockchain is one of those technologies that I would say hold great promise to give you a solution in certain contexts. Maybe not for everything, but it's something which we look very strong at, and I think we actually expect quite a bit to come out of it.
Yeah. And again, I mean, blockchain, it is a technology again. So the question is, what does it solve from a customer perspective? Blockchain is, at my knowledge, something where you can really prove a transaction. So the question is, where is a need out there that our consumers or enterprise customers have the need to absolutely prove that a transaction took part, and by whom? Okay? This is the kind of thinking we have to come up with.
I would like to go to the second question, which is also quite interesting. The question posted, IoT for sure is useful, but does every smart home device needs to connect it to the internet? Can they talk to each other directly? So I think it's a nice question about edge computing, and the question, is cloud computing a solution or not? Or should it still being an IoT device being independent from the web out there? I think it's targeting a bit towards security and ownership of data. How do you see this whole topic? Like now differentiating between B2C and B2B.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with the B2B area. So there's actually at the moment a quite interesting battle going on, which is basically, think about a component manufacturer, a company which basically makes the machines, right? So they're thinking about like a KUKA, they have their own clouds and so on and so forth, they provide those services. And actually, the question is the data then with those kind of customers? Then there are companies like GE who have actually the platform on top of that, or MindSphere, and, which is more in the middle. And then you have the OEMs actually who are using that data to run their own factory, and they say actually it's our data. So it's an interesting thing which is going on. So who's actually monetizing that data, and who's actually using it for creating a benefit? And I think with smart home, so because the question went to smart home, so one of the points I think is interesting is who's actually able to provide additional value to the customer. So if I have a smart home, and let's say there's an insurance company who's actually insuring me against someone breaking into my house, and they're providing the devices, and they will give me let's say a better rate when I use this. And actually, they will also use maybe that data to make me a cheaper offer, maybe. So then I might be interested in buying it from them instead of going to the shop and buying it myself. So it's always a question, who can provide really the value, the additional value, which is not possible without them. So this is a bit of ideas around that.
Yeah, so from an industrial perspective, again, spot on the question, do you have to send it all into the cloud and then hope for the best? No, you don't. And actually, in the industrial context, it's not the smart home, but it's your premises, it's the shop floor. And most companies are very reluctant to send the stuff somewhere into a cloud for a variety of reasons. So they say, can I have an installation on premise? Or you have an asset in the field somewhere where you are, I mean, it's isolated, it's the wind turbine, or it's a gas compressor station, whatever it may be. You don't want to send everything far away. You want to do whatever you can do locally, and only transmit to your global storage site what is necessary to transmit. And I think this is going to become a standard in industry, that you say, like, but why do you want to send that this? Can't you do this in here? And sometimes cost reasons may be an advantage, but it also restricts, of course, for those who are developing new applications, restricts access to those data. It's not easy to have someone who collects it all and does something on it, but it's going to be case by case, it's going to be factory by factory, it's going to be company by company, and some of it's going to be made available more broadly for the general benefit, and many things will stay proprietary on premise. So that is a continuous question we get is, okay, looks good what you have, cool system, I like it, can you have it on my premises installed and safely secured against the outside world?
I think we have also seen in the last months a few very successful smartphone providers. Their USP might be it can be installed on premise and is not cloud connected. So again, it becomes a market and the market regulates itself. Yeah.
So, I mean, from consumer perspective, the answer is very easy. Imagine you are on the move. Do you want to have your coffee brewed if you arrive at home or not? So if you want your coffee is finished, when you arrive at your home door, then you have to connect to the internet, because then you can switch it on the move. So that's basically the consumer view. But again, it's all about security, and this is something we have to really take honest here, because if we speak about embedded devices, then we can't apply a patch or an update every week. If we speak about embedded devices, we are often speaking about firmware flashes, and this is something that is not that easy, like patching a Unix system or something like this. If it goes wrong, your device is done. So what we have to think about is about new approaches in order to secure those devices without only focusing on the endpoint itself. Also focusing on the traffic, so making sure that no malicious code is traveling between your devices, and if it does, or unusual behavior occurs, so that you can interrupt it. But again, not only as we do in the server world, not only focus on the endpoints, but also on the traffic on the network.
Which is an issue which is applicable to almost every web engineering field, which shows how the problems are the same all over the place. And talking about platforms a bit, I would like to mention the second question, which is quite interesting. On IOTA itself, can it handle future problems of IoT? Where first we might ask what are future problems of, but since you started talking about IOTA, might you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, IOTA is really an interesting one, because when you look at today's blockchain technologies, they're, from my perspective, not really suitable for IoT world, because transactions, first of all, are really expensive. So if you look at a Bitcoin transaction, it could cost you up to 30 euros. I mean, depending on what type of transaction you're trying to do, it's quite expensive. So, and then there's a second challenge, which is scalability and performance. So if you have a massive amount of devices, what you want to really have is a scalable infrastructure, which is actually scaling more or less linearly, so you can really use this in IoT with a lot of small devices and small transactions which are maybe not worth 30 euros. So in both of the topics, is actually a promise from IOTA to kind of solve this. And I think what they are projecting is something like 2 cents, that's at least the numbers I saw, per transaction, which makes it kind of interesting. Also, performance-wise, the way how it is built is without not going too much into details, it's a tangential. So it's basically scaling. So for every transaction I want to do, I have to validate 2 other transactions from someone else who I don't know, which basically means the more people it uses, the faster it gets. So, and it is in an encrypted way. So in theory, it should be much, much faster than, let's say, what we see with blockchain. And the demand for it is big, because we just talked, I mean, if I want to do a critical transaction like an oil pipe, putting it on or off, you really want to make sure that this transaction is okay. And also, if you want to do payment between machines, for instance, you really want to make sure that it's a valid transaction. So I think, yeah, it's a great technology, but so let's say the early tests we did, are not yet up to that promise, to be honest. So I think it's in the beginning, so it's probably not yet there. But if I would be a developer, I would definitely have a look at that.
But since we're touching neighboring technologies, apart from blockchain, which is quite obvious, what you see as neighboring topics, technologies which are crucial to development IoT, or since they're there now, what they enable. Steffen, we talked about it before.
I guess I already mentioned the ones I see in focus. So again, it's all about security, securing the connections, and it's also applying big data technologies in order to handle, to manage the huge lakes of data. So we need really skills there. It's of no help if we have a nice looking application, but there's no meaningful for me as a customer, so that supports me in making a decision or recognizing cost saving potential or even turning my idea into life. So it's a wide span, but those are the key facts or the key topics from my perspective.
I think I would add sensors, reliable, robust, low-cost sensors that are long-lived and don't need much energy and have all these other good attributes, so that they can be stuck somewhere and then they live on for years and provide good quality data is very critical. Otherwise, as you know, I mean, trash in, trash out. So if the data isn't of good quality, nothing can be concluded from it.
But I think like hardware engineering is a part where the entrance barrier is higher than for other fields, especially for developers like starting to develop something, but we see very prominent examples where it worked out. What would you say, what is for a developer who wants to enter the field and wants to work in the field, what is an angle which is interesting? One you mentioned was like application development, but apart from that, like what you see, where are the big niches for small teams, flexible teams to provide something to the market?
So one thing I would add is the whole discussion around the digital twin. I think is a very relevant one, where you embed, in a sense, or you model your physical existence, whatever that may be, a complex power plant or a small system, small device. Give it a virtual image, if you will, in a sufficiently reduced yet complete enough form so that someone can take that and on the back of that model can start doing some optimizations and visualizations and data extractions and so on. I think that's a very critical piece which sits right at the interface between the physical and digital. So I'd say it's a domain where many people are investing a lot of brain power in to say, like, what is the best format for it? How deep does it have to be? How shallow can it be? How fast does it have to run? That's one of the domains, I think, which are interesting to look at.
So one of the things I found really interesting in that context is also that it also changes the programming model. So having, let's say, this edge compute and really, let's say, powerful, processors on the edge, you as a developer need to think about how can I program my machine learning, this analytics, basically in a way that I can push algorithms and the inference really down to the machines maybe sometimes, because there's no need to run it somewhere centrally or even on a shop floor IT. So I want to actually run it on the machine, because just imagine a condition monitoring for a machine. So the temperature goes up and a certain vibration level, and then you want to shut it down or do something with it or do an image recognition. Why is there a need to push it back and use it somewhere in the public cloud, let's say, yeah? But this requires really a different thinking and programming. So you need to be cautious of what is the compute power, what are the possibilities on the edge and on the different levels of edge. I mean, the edge could be the machine, the edge could be a hardware which is sitting in the shop floor, or it could be somewhere in the public cloud or on a platform. So you need to be really cautious about where you want to run which code and how it actually scales, which is requiring a different way of thinking.
Maybe just to add, at Vodafone side, we're also doing a lot in the enterprise market. It's centered all around our global data services platform. It's called GDSP. And this not just provides you access to your IoT devices that in turn can attach to hundreds of networks. Please don't pin me down on the number, but I guess we have continuous roaming around 600 networks around the globe. So literally, you can attach or connect to every device on the world with this platform. But it is also serving some managed services in terms of reporting, in terms of analytics. And we also provide professional services around the M2M business that help our customers to find the most sustainable, the most cost-efficient solution for their problem, for their challenge. And what we're going to do is, in Vodafone, we already provide a set of APIs, I think around 40 APIs, that enable our customers to integrate with their systems into our global, highly scalable, highly available GDPR platform. And the next step would be to also open those APIs for the developer community in order to come up with bright ideas. And the question is, and this is what we have to learn at Vodafone, what do you really need as a developer community in order to come up with sexy, smart applications on top of those stack? Okay.
I think that's a really interesting topic, actually. The question how to open up to the developer community and how to bring these two worlds together. You mentioned APIs, going beyond APIs, even open sourcing projects which you develop or incorporating open source technologies. What are your strategies towards integrating with the developer community and using of this potential?
So I would say that there's not yet a firm model that has emerged. It's still early stage, and you see a bit of everything. You see about kind of like almost like a challenge type thing, which is open to the public. You see collaborations around specific projects with small startup companies and innovative entrepreneurs in this domain. You see a lot of in-house activity being built up that is then also provides, I would say, something to connect, for the outside world to connect with. Many companies that are in this domain may not have the in-house competency themselves, which makes it harder to be a good partner to the outside experts. So you have to have a minimum of capability in-house too. I don't think that I would say that we have found a model yet that works for us across the board, but it's almost industry specific. In healthcare, we do it very differently from energy, for example. Also because the customer base is very different. So the kind of solutions you provide needs to meet somewhat different specifications, needs to have a slightly different flavor. And that's also guides, in a sense, and informs how you work with the outside community. But I mean, no doubt about that, building a capability to form and shape and live in ecosystems rather than having it all in-house, that is a must. There's no doubt about it. But I wouldn't say that we have found, hey, that's the model we use. It's a mix.
I think it's also far more complex in an industry context to encourage the community, because the industry domain-specific know-how.
So what we do is basically we publish a lot on GitHub. So we basically, the projects we do, like Platform DXC or our own IOTA and things we are publishing on GitHub, and actually inviting people to in hackathons. So we have regular hackathons where we're coding together. So I mean, and it's not just because we want to just give everything to the world. So it's really we want people to participate, have their ideas in, because I think it's also a bit of a, let's say, a competition on the best ideas. Yeah. So when you look at IoT, it's still a young field. I don't think everyone has already explored everything and has created all ideas. But we feel like, so we need to get the best ideas on the table and then see where it goes from there, because that's also what my customers expect from us. So they say, okay, how can you help me with IoT in this context of a factory or so?
And since you mentioned hackathons, what's the goal from the hackathons? Basically, is to find people or to find ideas, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's really you want to complete the task. I mean, this is then, let's say, the cheap one. But sometimes it's really to create out ideas, to get feedback on things we're working on, but also to kind of I think getting new ideas, getting feedback is an important one. I mean, and definitely, yes, if we find people who are talented, and sure, we want to have them on board.
Yeah, maybe again a little bit to add. We in Vodafone, we are currently running a digital telco strategy, and parts of this strategy now become reality because we are, at least in Germany, really planning quite a couple of roles to insource in the developer domain with bright brains like you that help us applying the latest frameworks, the latest technology in order to come up with smart end-to-end solution. Because again, more and more customers are asking for a one-stop solution. So they want to get one provider or one supplier that equips them with the means they need in order to solve the problem or challenge.
Okay, so your target is basically to use the developer community also to provide comprehensive solutions to the customer using your platform, which is a pretty straightforward strategy.
But also to become parts of the developer community or turn them into Vodafone developers.
The other way, so if you're interested, look him up and yeah, talk guys. I would like to address a question which is quite interesting, talking about privacy and data protection. So how privacy and data protection is considered in the strategies of the different companies, especially considering GDPR, which is a huge issue, especially with regulations coming up and technology questions which are not solved yet. Would you like to start?
Yes. So I mean, with the baseline is you cannot be exposed in this domain. It cannot be that you are having a reputation of being sloppy or casual about data privacy, data protection, privacy issues, and a few other things. So we pay a great deal of attention to it, and it's being demanded. I mentioned that many companies that we work with like some of the solutions, but want to make sure that stays on premise because they're not quite sure what happens if it goes out somewhere. Yeah. And it actually makes a difference these days in which part of the world your company is headquartered. Both East and West, I can tell you. So it's like, you know, where do you have where you have all your compute capacity, and how's the system designed, and can I trust you? It comes down to trust, sometimes even more than to, I would say, technical ruggedness, and there's no perfect seal of approval that your system is safe, can't be broken in, and that what you have in your software is absolutely only with the best intentions of mine. That is a fundamental problem. I think everybody knows it in the industry, and everybody thinks that is the one thing that could potentially lead to a much slower adoption, to resistance, to potentially, regulation, over-regulation. So everybody's paying a great deal of attention to it. But beyond that, I'm afraid we have to see where all this goes. It's such a critical topic. It can derail things so fast.
So GDPR is, I would say, is great for us as humans, especially for European citizens, but it's really a challenge for a company because you need either a contract with the end user or at least consensus that you are able to store and work with the data of a human being. So this is something I think we can solve on the application layer, that making it appealing, attractive for the end users, to giving us consents in order to better support, in order to better sell and bring our services to the user in the end.
Yeah, I'm not so positive about the, let's say, data protection in the shop floor. For me, what I see in the field, it's really a dark hole. So a lot of companies don't have a clue what's going on. And the reason for that is there's a lot of legacy devices in the shop floor who no one, not have been touched for years, I would say, yeah. So connected maybe somehow. So what we provide to those clients or customers is really, we try to help them looking really at the network level, sniffing, and we use security operations centers. We have 3 of them in Europe, where we basically, because the customers are not, or the owners of the manufacturing plants, they are not able really to understand where are actually the security holes in every device, because it's such a big mixture of things. And I mean, if you have a really new Siemens whatever device, yes, you will get the security and you will get great things, but there's stuff which is 10 years, 20 years old. Who is securing that? So the only way to do it at the moment is really to look at the network level, and then sniff on that, and then try to figure out if something strange is going on.
Yeah, let me add to that. I think you are actually spot on. It's an interesting discussion that we have, but it sometimes reminds me of autonomous driving. Where you say, like, the numbers tell you, or the license tells you that the number of people, casualties in traffic will go down massively. Yet, it's not a home run, right? Yeah, but what happens if they don't recognize that signal and something happens and someone is rolled over? The point is that that is a new threat that is unknown, unfamiliar to people, and there's a great desire to regulate it ahead of time to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. And the same thing is true here. People live with environments that are sometimes shocking, in terms of how insecure they are. But if you have a discussion around the future of the connected devices and everything, then, but can that be secure? They sometimes feel more secure than they are, but you can't have that dialogue without a reassurance that, but that's going to be 100% safe, don't worry about it. Another point I'd like to highlight here is what we are greatly concerned about is the, not confusion, but the unfortunate lumping of data all into one bucket. So sensitive data about individuals and machine data coming from machines. Right? They may get, at the end, through whatever legislative process, get regulated in similar ways, which would not be appropriate. Right? So we like to have great security and data privacy around individuals and sensitive data, but be much more open and easygoing around machine data. But it's not certain that regulation will go down that path.
But I think that makes the whole IoT discussion so interesting because it bridges between human data and machine data, and you don't know exactly what is what and which one belongs to whom. So that's what makes the whole thing complicated. But 100% your opinion that the focus, like now, is a super strong focus on a topic, where in other fields where it's a lot more virulent, the focus is.
But there are also new threat scenarios. So one of the projects we did was very interesting for one of the car makers to secure their connected car, basically using a technology from Israel, from a firefighter, fire jets, like jets, Kampfjets. And the reason why they wanted to say it, because they said, once you have a self-driving car and someone is able to breach that car, and actually we simulated that one, you can turn a car into a weapon. Very easy scenario. Just think about a self-driving car, someone hacks into the car and uses this car actually as a weapon. So how do you protect? I mean, this is let's say with all that new stuff coming up, there's also new, danger scenarios coming up. Also, when you expose a critical infrastructure like a power plant, yeah. So it's interesting if someone hacks into a power plant, IoT. So how can you really protect this? And this is, I think, that's the reason why it's so such a hot topic. Yeah.
No, because like we end up in the physical world. So suddenly the threats which have been digitally are now very real and very facing us. But I think we lead to the last round. So I would invite you as the last round. What would you say is the bottom line if we talk about IoT revolution? What is changing now for developers, for us, for the market? What is happening within the next months, not years?
So I would say we definitely need you as a community, and we need you full stack. Not just nice interfaces, graphical user interfaces or apps. You should also have a look onto the lower layers like security and data analytics. So if you are happy with that, then you are more than welcome to join the Vodafone family.
Yeah, technically, I would say the ground is prepared. What it takes now, maybe to give it the boost that it deserves, is a few shining, successful examples of how you can turn those data that you have access and give access to into revenues, into profits, into growth for companies. I think we're struggling primarily, I guess, with business models around the specific use cases. Ideas what to do are plentiful, but not all of it is either to realize an industrial context or is clear how it's going to be monetized at the end. So a few key examples where people show that's what you got to do and that's what the outcome is, I think is going to help enormously. The rest then hopefully is almost like a chain reaction and it's going to spread out by itself almost.
Still the search for the miracle element to add.
Yeah, for me it's everything is coming together, right? So we have analytics, we have device management, we have really interesting stuff, and the level of maturity of that technology is really becoming to a level where we need to have people, fresh minds, bringing things together to do great things with it. I think we're just now at this tipping point where, I haven't seen the killer app, but I think the technology is now in a state where someone could create it. And that's an interesting thing. I think I haven't seen something where I would say, okay, this is it. Even people who are talking about self-driving cars, so what's the big business, what you will do with that, right? So, but yeah, I think it's really interesting time for fresh minds, for people who want to explore this.
So please help us to get the world better understand what is IoT and what's in for them.
I think that's a perfect last word. I would say thank you very much. Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you very much to you coming here. It was a great discussion.